Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joseph Noy, and I want to welcome you to today's webinar, Leveraging Technology to Become a World-Class Function, based on the key findings from the NeuGroup's Principles of World-Class Treasury Management Systems project. On behalf of the NeuGroup, I want to thank all of you for joining us. We will move on to Eli Brown with UPS, another member of our project core team. Eli is Treasury Process Controller at UPS, the Atlanta-based global logistics leader, which means he is also part of governance around processes, implementing practices, and supporting technology. He will be joined by Jason Torgler from Reval, another one of our project partners, to offer perspective on the implementation findings. Jason is Senior Vice President for the Americas at Reval, where he helps companies understand how their business challenges can be addressed with the power of an all-in-one SaaS solution for treasury and risk management.
This is Jason Torgler from Reval. As David mentioned, I'm joined by Eli Brown from UPS, and we're looking to share some perspectives and key insights that relate to successful implementations. So there were 4 areas that were pinpointed in the intelligence provided back from the peer group and the survey results that dictate and have a high degree of impact success on implementations. Those areas are executive sponsorship, securing it in advance and having that sponsorship drive through the project. Number 2 is having a high degree of the Treasury practitioner or Treasury team leading the implementation effort. Third, having a well-defined future state, so not just looking at fixing your current state, but also scalability, as both David and Tiffany mentioned in the previous session, around scalability and meeting the demands of your future state and looking out 1 to 3 to 5 years, beyond your current state. And when possible, leveraging external resourcing to fill gaps at key points, which we'll touch upon shortly. So as it relates to executive sponsorship, as mentioned earlier, executive sponsor can help not only sponsor the initial business case approval for the project, but also help drive success throughout the project, including stepping in when issues arise. Eli, would love to hear from you as it relates to your project. How were you able to secure that support, and any comments around the ongoing executive participation in your projects?
Yeah, Jason. So for us in this area, it really comes down to framing the challenge or the issue in a language that's important for the CFO. So that was one of the key decision makers, key executives on our project. And for us, and some of this came out in our peer group discussion, it's a little bit tough to build this case purely on efficiency because treasuries are pretty thin, and even if you leverage technology, you might not be able to offset the cost of the project purely from payroll savings. And it's also tough to get the support by saying, hey, our systems are outdated, because I know, at least in our organization, a lot of groups have outdated systems, and so that's not something that really jumps to the top of the executives list. So determining what the key factors are for either the CFO or CIO that can help drive your project. Things like cash visibility, that's a big topic here. Exactly where is my cash, where's my trapped cash? Do our systems currently allow us to see that the way that we want to? And is that something we can leverage in a sales pitch for a new system? Things like fraud risk and other areas that have been touched on before, such as regulatory changes. So that was a big push for us, and that was one that gave us a lot of momentum, because it's not just purely, hey, this is Treasury and they've got their own needs to serve their agenda, but this is bigger than Treasury. It's something that's important to our organization, and that really helped get everybody on board.
Perfect. Thank you. Also love your perspective on the Treasury lead of the implementation. So the key findings from some of the surveys and the reports were that Treasury should take a primary focal lead in the deployment, not only starting out, but ongoing through go live. Yet some of the findings show that Treasury doesn't have the staff or the time or the dedication to support to the effort. So finding that balance between Treasury lead and their availability and their day jobs is a tough challenge. How did you address that at UPS?
Yeah, and I do think this is a really key finding, and honestly, being in the middle of this right now, I can't imagine it being successful any other way. Ultimately, this is Treasury's ship to sail, and you want to have the captain working in Treasury, otherwise you might end up at a destination that you didn't want to go to. So for us, and I think Jeremy's going to talk a little bit about this later, but we established a Treasury Systems group at the beginning of our process as we were building our requirements and trying to gain momentum for the project. We knew it was going to be more than our current staffing could support, and so we formed a team dedicated to seeing this through, that reports up through Treasury and is responsible for all of the different aspects of the project.
So as it relates to the future state requirements, one of the things that was brought up a lot was to identify what that 1, 3, 5, even maybe 10-year outlook would look like, looking into that crystal ball and baking those requirements and finding a way to bake those requirements into the selection process and obviously the rollout and maybe some of the phasing of the rollout. So, from your perspective, what are some of the ways that you achieved kind of that vision towards the future, and how did you incorporate those requirements, into your selection process and, going forward into the deployment to make sure that you are future-proofed?
Yeah, from my perspective, there are a couple of key points there. And one, especially at UPS, we have the blessing of having a lot of very long-tenured UPSers that we work with, which in a case like this with evolving technology creates a challenge because you don't know what best practices are. You don't know what the marketplace is doing. So for us, in forming the vision, it was very important to lean on groups like this, like the NeuGroup, lean on peers. We're based in Atlanta. There are a lot of big corporates that are also in Atlanta that we could talk to see what best practices were from their perspective, and also to leverage consultants because they go into a lot of organizations. They see processes. They understand what that future state could be. So for us, that was important in building the requirements, because if it was purely just looking at our current processes, we wouldn't fully understand what was possible. The second point I'd like to make on this is working cross-functionally within your organization, because undoubtedly there's going to be aspects of your project that touch on different parts of your organization. For us, it was the International Finance and Accounting team has a lot of overlap with what happens in Treasury. We also have shared service sites that process payments on a large scale. So it was important for us to sit down with those teams and understand where are they going, what do they want to be able to accomplish, so that when we built out our Treasury system, it was able to accommodate what they would want. Because again, taking it back to the prior point of executive sponsorship, if you can come to the table and show that you're not only solving Treasury's problem but also helping your partners, that's a good selling point.
So as it relates to external consultants, knowing the fact that Treasury staff have a tough time kind of breaking away from their day jobs to allocate resources to a project, but also, like you mentioned, some of the key insights that consultants could share on the future vision of the project. And what's your recommendation from your experiences on external consultancies as it relates to Treasury projects?
Yeah, definitely visioning, like I mentioned before, and then augmenting areas in the implementation and in the resource load where you have gaps. So for us, our number of resources varies at our regional Treasury centers, whether it's our office in Asia, EMEA, or in our Americas region office. So as we're defining our project plan, we're looking to see what are the gaps, and are those places that we need to bring in consultants to help fill gaps, or is it a better approach for us to bring somebody on? So in many cases, it is better for us to hire someone temporarily to push through a bottleneck in the project. The one point that a colleague here in Atlanta made to me that I thought was a really great point I wanted to share with everyone is just make sure that as you're doing your implementation, that the team that's going to stay at the company learns how to use the system and learns what the best practices are. You can't afford to pay the consultants to learn everything about your system and then walk away when you're done and not know how to manage the system yourself.
Thanks, Eli, for those perspectives across executive sponsorship, the Treasury Lead of the implementation, as well as the future defined state and external consultants. So a couple key findings before I switched over to the customer support best practices. We also identified a number of key challenges. So things aren't always as rosy as you'd like them to be. The top 3 challenges that came back around implementation of Treasury projects were all based upon internal resourcing. So no surprises here. Just be aware of it, whether it be Treasury resource availability, competing projects within the company, as well as IT's resourcing and support of the project came back as 3 top challenges. All of which you just have to factor into the project on a go-forward basis. And a couple key call-outs here as well. Again, as mentioned earlier, the Treasury team being dedicated and focused on the project has a high degree of success. Also with legal, we noticed that there was a strong correlation between companies that have a high degree of business units internationally and legal's involvement was there. So highly advised from some of the survey results to get legal involved on tax implications. Legal and tax involved with multiple business units and the impact on some of the Treasury transformation initiatives that you're looking to go through.
I want to take this opportunity to once more thank all our panelists for their time and sharing of insights today, and again to thank all of you for your time and attention this afternoon, and hopefully there were at least a few takeaways to make it worthwhile. I can't imagine that that's not the case, but we thank you for joining us and appreciate any feedback and follow-up. Thanks, everyone.